And the Wizards going on a big run against the Celtics on Sunday. And, of course, the Orioles taking on the Nationals the next couple of days. But, the afterglow of the NFL draft, I couldn't get everybody on last week that I wanted to have on. And, of course, our partner in crime here at WNST on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation and everything they do around town is our head coach, Brian Billick. We welcome him back onto the program. Of course, Coach Billick out on Twitter. You go a little dormant right now, don't you? This is, the ski season's over. The boating season begins. This is sort of the time of the year where you start growing that beard. Is that happening again?
Oh, yeah. I'm in full mode. Yeah, the boats are out, so it's time to get cranked up again. It was a great time in Philadelphia, though. I tell you what, the city of Philadelphia can be proud. That was a hell of an event they put together. Wasn't quite sure how it was going to be laid out, but it was magnificent. Had 100,000 people the first night, and I hope the league will go back and give Philly a second chance. I hope they keep that up. Chicago was even better the second year than it was the first year. I imagine Philly will be the same way.
Come on, Coach. It's never going back to Philly. They got 29 other places that want it now, right? I mean, Bob Kraft wants it. Jerry wants it, so Jerry's going to get it, right? I mean, put that thing there. Denver, Kansas City, places where they can't have a Super Bowl, where the weather might be nice the last week of April, and certainly the weather did its part in Philadelphia for the most part. I mean, the weather was as much of the story. When you get an 80-degree night in the middle of April, everybody's coming out, right?
Yeah, and the league, you're exactly right. It's going to be like Super Bowls where we're going to start bidding. And it'd be great if the league would pass around into areas where you're really not going to get a Super Bowl, although like you said, we're going to see one in Dallas, we're going to see one in LA probably because of the new stadium that's going to go up down there. So, but I think it's great because the fans, it gives them a chance, those that are close. It moves it around so that regionally, where you might not normally have a chance to go to a draft, I think it's a great idea.
All right, Coach. So winners and losers were all made last week, and we went through it a little bit here, but I want to have some fun with you. The Browns win the draft every year, right?
Yeah, and that's not something you want to do necessarily because it means you probably have the high picks. You got 3 picks in the first round. You're going to obviously it's going to be a good day. And I think the Cleveland Browns did a nice job. I think they did a good job with what they put together. The biggest question now is, okay, what are you going to do with the quarterback position? They have passed up a lot of guys, and we'll see whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. If any of these guys, I've lived it firsthand. We've joked about it many years. 2 things you can't do in this league. You can't miss on a first-round quarterback, and you can't not take a first-round quarterback that ends up being pretty good. And there's certainly a number of them the Browns have passed by. But they are a better football team today than they were at the end of the season, given the draft that they've had. The question is, how are they going to do a quarterback?
Well, and then there's the Ravens and the Bengals and the Steelers in this division. And, we've talked so much about how well the Steelers have drafted. The Ravens have been sort of teetering. I think the Ravens got some high marks for the players they picked up for value and for what Ozzy's trying to do. But I'll tell you what, Coach, and you know this because you're up and down the freeway from Philadelphia down here to Maryland. People are up in arms that Joe Flacco got no help in the draft. I find that to be sort of fascinating from Ozzy, from Eric, from George, from the people that run the organization that they went through the weekend without getting skill position help for him. That sort of shocks me.
Well, the philosophy has always been, it was obviously when I was there, and I can't imagine it's changed a great deal, and a lot of teams subscribe to it. You want to hopefully do enough things in free agency so that it doesn't force your hand in the draft, that you take on a player that, on the board, more highly rated on the board, or force yourself into taking a player that you'd rather not take based on all the work you did on your board. And so obviously the Ravens, they're going to feel like they've done enough in free agency as they've gone forward, whether it's substantial enough or not. The players that were available to them, I don't think you can argue. I think they had a good, solid draft. It is clearly they're seeing the needs on the defensive side of the ball, because when you're looking at the first 3 rounds being exclusively the defensive side of the ball, and you go back to last year, when you get past the taking of Ronnie Stanley in the first round, the second, third, and fourth rounds were so heavily on the defensive side of the ball.
Head Coach Brian Billick joining us here on WNST. You can follow his journey out of Coach Billick on Twitter. And, of course, he appears here as one of our partners on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation, their Maritime Magic, coming up in a couple of months at the end of the summer. You can go check that out at livingclassrooms.org as well. Speaking of quarterbacks, and, we've had fun at your expense and with you and all that stuff through the Kyle Bowler era. A couple teams did that on draft night, right? I mean, the Chicago Bears will be defined by Trubisky, and now I guess Jay Cutler's going to be, one of the critics stepping into the next circle. And then, of course, later on in the draft, your buddy Andy Reid sticks his neck out for Patrick Mahomes. And then the Texans did what they did last year, which was go into the market and find a quarterback, this time in the draft in Deshaun Watson. Those are three franchise-defining moves in the first, let's be there, the first hour on Thursday night. That's what made the draft so exciting that night, I think.
Yeah, and the fact that they gave up the resources they did to get there. When it comes to the quarterback, it's pretty clear-cut and straightforward. And it's interesting to hear the talk about, well, how does Trubisky or Mahomes rate to the other players? That's a silly conversation. Either you believe they are a franchise quarterback or they're not. If they are, there's no player taken in the first round. There's no player taken first overall that is worth more. I don't care how good they are at any other position if you think the guy is a franchise quarterback. And obviously these teams believe that Trubisky, Mahomes, and Watson, moving up the way they did to get them, they're saying definitively, we think they're a franchise quarterback. And we can go round and round about, well, when should you start them, when should you play them? They're each going to dramatically different circumstances. But in the league today, you don't take a player with the 2nd, 10th, and 12th pick overall and give up what you did, unless you plan on playing these guys.
Well, and what did you make of these guys, and what did you make of the value of all of it, and that everyone really did fall in love with Trubisky, right? Like, I don't know that anyone would have taken the other guys over him. He clearly sort of defined himself as that guy that the Bears felt like they needed to give away half a draft to move a spot because they were so concerned that someone was going to come and get him, because even if somebody came and got Mahomes or Deshaun Watson above them, they would have had a crack at him. He was, coveted by more than just them, I think.
Yeah, and that's exactly why the Bears did what they did. Now, if you listen to the Denver people, the San Francisco people, they'll tell you no, there really wasn't much pending there. So you could make the calculation that they overstepped it in terms of Chicago, but they had to secure it, and it goes back to they obviously believe he's going to be a franchise quarterback. These quarterbacks were hard to evaluate. They seem to get harder and harder every year because of the style of play in college football. These guys, in most systems, look to the sideline, get the play, hand off a draw, throw a bubble screen. And a lot of that doesn't translate into the NFL. And when you're talking about Mahomes coming out of Texas Tech, Watson coming out of Clemson, and even Kaiser coming out of Notre Dame, the style of play made it very hard. You have to have a lot of conviction to say, yes, I think these guys are definitively franchise quarterbacks. Trubisky, obviously coming out of a little bit more conventional system, although coming out of the gun, but he only had the 1 year. So this is a statement. These guys, you got to give Chicago, Kansas City, Houston, credit for having the courage of their convictions, because they, with little data to go on, put it out there saying, yeah, we believe these are franchise quarterbacks.
Coach, I have the good fortune to sit around here in February and March and even April. I get some baseball, some opening day. There's a little lacrosse. You got some horse races. I'm into hockey and the NBA, and there's other things going on. In the NFL vernacular, there's just this draft on the backside of free agency, and I think we spend so much time now, and all the mock drafts are out there, and I know Eric Edholm wrote a great piece about Joe Bucksbaum, who I know from your era, along with Mel Kiper, and what this whole thing's become. I mean, even for you and your retirement from being a coach, you're still very much into this draft and as versed on all the players. And Phil Savage, our old friend, the same thing, he's involved. So many people have opinions, and I've talked to you. I don't know that anybody could have predicted 3 wide receivers and 3 quarterbacks and a safety going in the top 12, right? I mean, when that happens, things happen in the middle of the board to shoot all these guys down. I mean, as Ozzie came up on the board, there are all these Alabama guys there. One of them's a tight end, and that was very highly rated. Were you shocked to see Ozzie go with Humphrey? I mean, I don't know that Ozzie woke up on Thursday believing that many quarterbacks and wide receivers were going to go to dump the Hookers and the Humphreys and the Allens and the Howards down the charts the way they went.
Yeah, well, that's what, obviously, if you're a little further down, given the quarterback situation, that's what everybody's hoping for. They hope that these quarterbacks get pushed up there, because that just pushes everybody. When you talk about these 3 quarterbacks being pushed into the top 12, and we'll find out whether they're worthy or not, but the fact of the matter is that pushed 3 pretty good players further down the board, also the wide receivers, in what was a very good and as good a DB safety draft as we've seen in a while. So, and that's the interesting thing about the mock draft. It's always interesting for me to watch as we close into it. They say, well, this guy's moving up the board or that guy's moving up the board. Well, is he really? Is a player in the last week of the draft all of a sudden being evaluated as being better? Or, as is the case with these mock drafts, does someone find out that some team or teams have this player rated that high. So it's not like they came higher for these teams over the last couple of weeks. People were just finding it out. And yeah, I got to believe Ozzie, and obviously he has a tough time passing up an Alabama player, and rightfully so, because they're pretty darn good. But yeah, I can't imagine. It reminds me a little bit of in the Suggs draft, that we had no idea Suggs was going to fall to us at 10. I remember very specifically in doing the reading on Suggs that we'd get through that, and we'd kind of not rush through it, but it's like, look, this guy's not going to be available at 10. So yeah, go ahead. Let's rate him, and okay. But yeah, if he's there, we turn the card in, as they say, and we move on. And it was a surprise because of what it pushed Suggs back to us for a lot of different reasons. Well, the quarterbacks clearly were a factor in pushing a player like Hooker, who likely could have gone in the top 10.
You know, safeties were, you had all this with Ed Reed and contract and, how much money they make. Safeties have changed, right? And secondary in general, and talking about Marlon Humphrey, a lot of things have changed about the way the football gets thrown in the modern era that we saw. Look, last year I sat here and watched Odell Beckham, I watched Des Bryant, I watched Antonio Brown, I watched all these special wide receivers really separate themselves in the fourth quarter when the Ravens had no pass rush and had no Jimmy Smith. And the Ravens got beaten, and the Ravens would have been thought to be a much better team last year if they could have defended over the top in the fourth quarter. They couldn't. I was not shocked at all that they went DB, but much like you, I got, sort of gerrymandered in March and April into believing Mel Kiper, mock draft when they said the Ravens might take a tackle in Ryan Ramczyk, or the Ravens may go for one of these wide receivers who, as it turned out, weren't even there, which is even more shocking. We get to that in a minute, but the secondary thing and the safety position especially has become a very, very coveted area right now, and if you don't have it, you're going to lose.
Yeah, and it has changed. It used to be you didn't take a safety, and we've become very, very specific, or I should say role-specific, because it's anymore. You don't just take a safety. Well, is he back-end safety? Is he in the box safety? You don't take just a defensive end. Is he a rush defensive end? Is he a point attack defensive end? Excuse me. Is he one of these hybrid guys? A tight end. You used to be tight ends you didn't take early either. But, okay, is this a point of attack tight end, or is this a guy that could stretch the field down the field? So, yeah, when you're looking at a guy over the last, 5-6 years, it has changed. Eric Berry going with the fifth overall draft. LaRon Landry went with the sixth overall pick in the draft. Dante Whitner with the eighth overall pick. Earl Thomas went with the 14th overall pick. So, yeah, I think the landscape for safeties and how their value has clearly changed over the last 5 or 6 years, given the changes in the game and how more open it is.
Well, it changed your life, right? I mean, having McAllister and Starks in their prime, and I know sometimes not the easiest to coach C-Mac, but then you didn't have them, and then the Samari Rolls come in, and then, to be honest, I mean, you were out there playing with Willie Gaston at the end of your era, and that made a huge difference in the things that Rex Ryan wanted to do with your defense, right?
Oh, gosh, are you kidding me? Sure. I mean, I remember going into Seattle in that last year, and Rex, it was painful. It was physically painful to watch Rex call that cover two, because that's all we could do. We just didn't have any other players. So, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this game is about the players and gives you, regardless of what you think you can do X and O's wise and whatever schemes you want to employ. And it was interesting to see, obviously, that the DBs and safeties were, you're typically going to see maybe 13, 14 DBs taken in the first couple rounds. Well, this year in particular, in those first 3 rounds, they were going like wildfire because the game has changed, where it used to be 60% base, 40% nickel, then became 40% base, 60% nickel. Most defensive coordinators will tell you they were in base defense less than 20% of the time this year. So that changes the numbers of the players you need to carry with regards to defensive linemen, as opposed to hybrid linebackers, guys that can be 3 downs on linebackers, and then obviously on the back end.
Coach, I've known you a long time, and I don't remember you even in your era in coaching being really all that hot and bothered about any draft pick. I mean, you always sort of had to wait and see, because I think you had seen so many guys that were ballyhooed to be whatever come into the league and struggle for all sorts of reasons. What gets you excited about a player? And I don't know how many of these guys you're actually excited about, and talking about them and watching film, but what at heart gets you excited about what player in the first round of this draft to say, yeah, I would bet on that guy to be a really good player in that system?
Well, I always look at it from the standpoint of what team is he going to initially, and that's not to say that one team will develop him better than the others, but what is the fit? I think the first round this year, I think everybody can feel good about it because I think everybody addressed a lot of needs in the first round because that's the way that draft felt. So I think everybody feels good about their draft. But I look at a team like Tennessee; they very much intrigue me. This is a team that is on the come. They're set at the quarterback position. Their needs, in particular, for this draft, they needed DBs and wide receivers, and that was going to be the important thing for them. Well, how about coming into a draft where DB and wide receiver happens to be the best position? I mean, things kind of have fallen well for Tennessee. Now we'll find out, but they ended up taking Corey Davis, the kid from Western Michigan, at wide receiver. Then they have Adoree Jackson, who had kind of moved up at the end. A lot of people think a lot of from SC, the cornerback from SC, picked up another wide receiver in the third round from Western Kentucky, Tawan Taylor. So I think Tennessee had a very interesting draft, and I'll be interesting to watch how these players perform, not just only because they have some great potential, but they went to a team that they fell in just the right position. I think a guy like Leonard Fournette is going to be very interesting, and Christian McCaffrey are going to be very interesting to see how they impact their teams.
Coach, I know we both have a mutual fondness for Marvin Lewis in Cincinnati, but what were they doing, right? I mean, I had to explain to Jen on Friday night that Marvin took the kid that punched his girlfriend in the fast food joint, you know? That didn't go well.
Well, this was going to be a tough one. And every year we have a handful of guys. It's okay. What are you going to do with these guys that have had these off-the-field issues in varying degrees? The tough thing for Joe Mixon, not to make light of it or to excuse it in any form or fashion, but the fact that tape is going to be seen over and over and over again. That added another element to some of the other guys in the draft that had some issues, you know, and we'll see. Now, we're a nation of, hey, we love second chances. I was with Steve Smith over the draft, which is great. Steve's going to join me on game day first on Sunday mornings.
Now, that's going to be something. Now, you know, I have a mutual, relationship with each of you in different ways and different times. This is you and Steve Smith together. I mean, what time? 7 in the morning? I'm going to have coffee over this?
Yeah, it's going to be fun because he's not for want of opinion, obviously. And it was interesting. Whew. We were talking about this issue, and I love the term that he used because the question was put directly to Steve. Okay, what does Cincinnati, as a teammate, if you're in Cincinnati, how do you deal with Joe Mixon? How does he, brought into the team? And Steve, I love the term he used. He says, Joe Mixon needs to earn his voice. He needs to understand that he needs to be seen and not heard. He needs to come in and do his job both on and off the field, show on a daily basis that he can be a functional team member and a community member, do his job, and earn your voice. Don't try to explain it. Don't try to make excuses. And I thought that was a fascinating way to put it. And we'll see. He's going to have an opportunity, and you hope that he can learn and go forward. Cincinnati has done this a number of times. We love the redemption stories. It also can come back and bite you.
He is our head coach here at WNST on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation. Of course, you can learn more at livingclassrooms.org and, of course, at Coach Billick out on Twitter. All right, man, so you're just chilling. You're walking the earth right now. You're living the Michener's Chesapeake for the next couple of months, huh?
Great time of year. Chesapeake's just cranking up. Going to look forward to it. And then before you know it, we're going to blink and we're going to be into training camp. I'm
looking forward to that as well, Coach. So rest up here in the springtime. We'll check in with you. The next time, I don't know, the Bills are looking for a general manager or something. It's still crazy. Any time of the year, things can happen. Even the Bills can fire everybody the day after the draft, right?
That's the NFL, and that's why we're never one for something to talk about.
Rest up while you can. There he goes, head coach Brian Billick joining us here on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation. He is Coach Billick out on Twitter. You can find me out in the Bayou Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning, and that's all powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. It's still $10 a month to get in shape. The color purple is there for you, a little purple and gold. There's Planet Fitnesses everywhere, and it's almost bikini season, man. We're getting into May now. I know it's a little chilly this weekend, but plenty of time to get to Planet Fitness, and certainly the price is right to get you in shape. Last but never least, any breaking news, of course, with the Orioles every day. They're sending somebody up, somebody down, and Tillman in, and Britton out, and we'll be talking with Luke more about that as the week goes on. And, of course, the Orioles taking on the Nationals here all week long. You'll get it first on the WNST text service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Kolatzis will be here on Thursday driving you home. It is the SSV. That is the Sunday Sports Voice on Thursday from 3 until 5 right here at WNST.net. Nashville, Green Bay, London, our trips are on sale. You can email me or you can learn more under the Road Trips tab out on the website. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNST TV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.